A very pleasant good afternoon, good evening to all, and welcome to the rush. Welcome to the afternoon rush. It was the evening rush right now because we're starting a little late this afternoon. Some of you may notice that Facebook has some technical difficulties. Facebook was actually off for a few moments, and we recently came on back. So let's see what is happening with that. Again, we're getting some issues with Facebook, so our numbers may not seem like may not look like what they usually are this evening. Still having some issues, some technical problems with Facebook, but we want to say welcome to the rush this afternoon for the 8th of April 2021. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Welcome to those persons joining us in the diaspora, the Caribbean, right here in Guyana. Thank you very much for logging in, tuning in this afternoon. As usual, we like to start the show with you telling us where you're joining us from. We like to hear from you about where you're getting us from, where you're tuning in from, who is in the house, who is ready to do some unpacking of the credible and valid information today on the afternoon rush with yours truly. Tell us where you're joining us from this afternoon. All right, good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon again to every single body joining the afternoon rush here. Right, just let us know where you're coming from as we give those persons some time to tune in, because we know there are some issues, some difficulties right now with Facebook. So we are going to, allow the others to come into the rush. Um, Listening from Barbados, Brooklyn in the house. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're starting a little late this afternoon, as I would have mentioned, because Facebook had some issues today. If you're getting us, Tugville in the house, thank you very much. Linden, thank you very much for tuning in. We had some issues with Facebook, so we're going to be going from 6 to 7 this evening, and then, of course, we'll join my colleague Sharon Duncan in the ring at 8 p.m. Let me just get my thoughts together. This afternoon, we're going to be covering a number of things. Severe flooding in region number 7. Severe flooding in region number 7. The cases of missing persons continue to rise. We see more missing persons. Two more COVID deaths today. One of the missing persons, his body was found. So we're going to be discussing that also. We're going to be looking at petition 88 in a bit. And then our story behind the story for this evening is one that you might be interested in, because we will try to uncover and unmask who is the person representing GCOM, Mr. Anthony Astafan, senior counsel from Dominica. Who is this gentleman? How is it that he came to be representing GCOM in this matter? You will be surprised at what we would have unearthed as we did a little digging, just a little digging as to the character and the man who is senior counsel Astafan. So we'll be going into that. That's the story behind the story today, as we try and unearth who this character is, who is representing GCOM in the petition cases. And you will want to stay tuned for that. It's quite surprising, quite interesting, quite revealing information coming out there about this particular character. So we have a lot to cover this evening. Lots to cover, right? Let's start with, as we always say. And before we get started, folks, share the live stream. Like we always say, we're live on YouTube also, because we know some of you, if your friends normally look at the show on the Facebook, let them know that Facebook is experiencing some difficulties at the moment, but they can tune into APNU AFC on YouTube, and they'll be able to get us loud and clear over there on YouTube. So that is that. If you know someone who likes to watch the show, but they might not be getting it now, you can message them on WhatsApp and say, you know what, share the link. We are on YouTube also, APNU AFC on YouTube, so you can catch all of the credible and valid information on the rush right there on YouTube if you're not getting Facebook, as some places are not getting Facebook at the moment. I am still experiencing some problems with Facebook on my phone. I seem to be getting it now, right? Right. So we wait. I think we have. Just let me know if you're hearing us clearly. Let me just check my audio. Right. Just let us know if you're hearing us clearly. Right. And you can let us know in the comments if you are hearing us clearly this afternoon on the rush, because we are trying to get all of you to be hearing us, all of you hearing us correctly. Just give me a thumbs up. Let us know. All right. Thank you very much. Right. So all, thank you very much for telling us that you're hearing us clearly. We're going to continue with the show this afternoon. As I said, lots of things to cover. In region number 7, we are hoping to thank you very much, Simona Blackman, who is looking at us from YouTube. Miss Hall, of course, again on YouTube. Thank you very much for those persons who are looking at us from YouTube and Facebook. Let's go. Let's unpack some issues this afternoon, folks. It has been 402 days since the March 2nd regional and general elections, and this country still does not have credible results from those elections. Of course, it's been 249 days. 249 days since this fraudulent administration would have been installed again on those fraudulent numbers gleaned from the national recount, right? And we can extract and unpack all that happened at the recount over and over. We will come to the same conclusion that numbers that were not deemed credible were used to declare the results of the March 2nd regional and general elections. So it has been 402 days since we had elections, and we still do not have credible results from those elections, right? We can dance around the issue as much as possible, as all we want. At the end of the day, the chief elections officer, based on what happened at that recount, said that he could not deem these results credible. That is, if that is not damning, I don't know what is. How it is that the chief elections officer can say, based on all of what was discovered, that these results cannot be deemed credible. But here we have the PPP, fraudulent PPP, willing to sit in the seat of power comfortably as if, you know what, they are there legitimately. And of course, folks, they are going to be doing everything possible to try and stymie and railroad the process of petitioning. That those 2 petitions in the court, you are going to see every trick in the book to try and get that process railroaded or stymied or slowed to a crawl or kick down the road somehow. That is what you're going to see. We already saw it with this technicality that was used to throw petition 99 out. When the court, of course, there are procedures in the court to remedy such situations when there is a mistake on service. But we will not get into those fine details right now. What we will say to you, that we expect the PPP to try and stymie and railroad the process of petitions, right? So the country has been saddled now with a government in place on fraudulent results, right, for 249 days. 249 days. And that is what the reality is. The legacy of this fraudulent administration will continue to be that. Just that, fraud. Because they have not proven to anyone, not even their own supporters, that they are not sitting in the seat of power based on fraudulent numbers that the world saw in the recount. In no other part of the world could you open up. In no other part of the world could you open up 47 ballot boxes and find not one single document to support or to verify whether or not these ballots are real or correct. And you count those ballots and include them in the overall number to select a government, to elect a government. That is the definition of installation. No other part of the world could you open up 49 boxes and find nothing else but ballots, no way to verify them, and then add those numbers into the whole and say, look, X government won, or X party won, sorry. It's an absolute farce. What happened at the recount was an absolute farce and a slap in the face of every single Guyanese. Every sane and right-thinking Guyanese who sat in front of their televisions, who were part of that recount, who looked on, who cast their ballots. It's a slap in their face. It's an insult to their intelligence to think that you can open up 47 or 49 boxes and you find no statutory document. But you go on to add those same ballots to the whole and say, look, based on these numbers, X party won. It's a farce. It is a farce. And it is on that basis that this fraudulent PPP government is sitting in the seat of power. And there is not one iota of evidence, not one shred of evidence to say that that is not the case. And that, my friends, is the reason why you see such a fight down for Petition 99 not to be heard in the court of law. Because it is extremely embarrassing to the PPP, who is sitting in the seat of power based on fraudulent numbers, to have the fraud be exposed in a court of law. The reality is that there is no court, no sane judge that would see the mountain of evidence that was uncovered during that recount and say, yes, this was a free and fair election, nothing went wrong here. It's almost a foregone conclusion that if the evidence is presented in a court of law, the judge will have no other choice but to say these elections must be vitiated based on the amount of inaccuracies, the amount of problems, the amount of fraud that was uncovered and wrongdoings uncovered. Then we must do this thing over. So that is primarily the problem that the PPP has. Anytime the evidence is presented, the evidence amounting, the overwhelming amount of evidence presented that was uncovered during the recount, if that is presented in court, you don't need to know what the answer will be. It's very, very clear and obvious. So by all costs, that petition must not be heard. That is what they will be calculating at this point in time. Right? Again, right? Just for, let me just carry on this discussion a little bit. Let me just push on in this discussion a little bit. For the persons who might be a little daft and a little slow, who are still talking about statements of polls, right? It is beyond me that your thinking is so shallow and so behind that you are still asking about statements of polls. The PPP's fraudulent government, fraudulent administration is not sitting in the seat of power based on statements of polls. Statements of polls were thrown out the window when we had the recount. We had what is called statements of recounts, which are new numbers. Not the same numbers on the statements of poll. The statements of poll were made null and void when the recount started. So stop asking for statements of poll. You're making yourself look foolish. You realize that none of the PPP officials, none of the PPP ministers, none of the PPP lawyers are talking about statements of polls. It is just these sycophantic people who don't think for themselves. Some PPP supporters who are refusing to think for themselves are running around talking about statements of polls. I say to you again, it is not very hard to understand. It's a very simple concept. Statements of polls were used after the polls. Obviously, we went to a recount where we are generating new numbers based on what we got out of the box. Those are called statements of recount. So you had to decide which one you're going to use. This fraudulent administration is sitting in the seat of power on the results of the statements of recount, not the statements of polls. So asking people about statements of polls at this point in time is just an idiotic thing to do, right? So lest you continue to sound like an idiot, stop asking about statements of polls for your own sake, right? Please stop asking about them because you're making yourself sound stupid and you're just exposing your ignorance. Stay quiet and try and observe and learn, right? So additionally, as we are talking about that, additionally, the problem with what happened at the recount, outside of the whole fact that the Order 60 might not have been constitutional, we're not even going to get into that. But the fact that Guyanese got an opportunity to audit the boxes, to go into the boxes, we revealed so many different things, so many fraudulent things that happened on the day, that it's hard for anybody to actually say, yes, these elections were credible. It cannot be credible when in only one area you found 9 boxes without documents, totally void of documents to support or validate those ballots in there. You know, man used to say that no make sense. But we have an administration, right? We have an administration that is sitting in the seat of power comfortably believing like the world doesn't know that they're sitting in the seat of power based on fraudulent recount numbers. But on this I shall say no more. Right? I shall say no more. Folks, we're going to move on from this. As I said, we have a number of other issues. None more important than what is happening with the people in our country. Today, Guyana recorded 2 more COVID-19 related deaths. 2 more COVID-19 deaths. The death toll now stands at 252 persons. This is according to the Ministry of Health. Folks, we cannot decry or we cannot belabor the point enough that you have to do the right thing. We are seeing more and more serious strains popping up around the world. More and more serious strains popping up around the world. And it is, and I said this before, we are operating like the frog in the water, in boiling water. Slowly. And again, I said many weeks ago, that if we wake up tomorrow and we hear 100 or 80 or 200 persons died in one day, it would be panic and chaos in the country. But because these 252 persons spread over a number of months, we don't feel as if anything is happening in our country. But this is 252 Guyanese who are no more. They're gone. Whether this happened over a week or over 5 months or over a year, it's still an extremely sad situation that people are, right? So again, we want to say that you need to do what you need to do to protect yourselves. Obey the COVID-19 regulations. We always start with these numbers, these bad numbers on our show. And we are hoping that people do what they need to do to protect themselves. As we talk about COVID-19, we recognize that the Ministry of Education has pushed back their proposed reopening of school, the full reopening of school. It was slated for this month after the Easter holiday. The Minister of Health came out recently and said that this will not be so. You know, I am not against the reopening of schools, and this is my personal opinion. This is my opinion. I'm not against the reopening of schools, but in light of what is happening, it must be a clear plan, right? Must be a very clear plan. Parents must be confident that they're sending their children into a school that caters for the current environment. How many students will be in the school? Will it be a shift system? Will the classroom be adequately spaced? What are the provisions for children before and after school? What are the hygiene requirements and precautions put in place at these schools? These are things that parents need to be confident in before they let their children go back out there. So again, I believe that we need to reopen schools, but I believe that there needs to be a clearly communicated plan to the populace. And that is what has been missing. That is what has been missing. There is a definite lack or a lapse in communication between the Ministry of Education and the parents out there, who are the most important set people in this equation, because they have their children's health to think of. They're the ones who are going to say whether or not we will let our children go back into this environment. If we look around the world, Canada, with its wonderful and world-renowned healthcare system, has decided that they will go back in lockdown. They will close schools. Children are going back to online learning. And these are first world countries. These are countries that have way superior healthcare system and resources than us. Neighboring Suriname has taken steps to lock down also. But again, we seem to be going step by step in this sort of this dance of unknown. We can try it. We don't do it. We can try. Folks, there needs to be a clear plan. We don't have 1 million people in Guyana. It's not rocket science to say, folks, let us devise a shift system where only half of or 40% of the students will be in school at a time, so we can adequately space them. Let's invest in some Wi-Fi for these communities who don't have, so that the children who cannot come in, or parents who choose to keep their children home, they can still receive the education. Right? Something needs to be done, and it needs to be communicated clearly to the people. What else do we have in the news, folks? As we move on this afternoon, I'm being told that Facebook has sort of sorted out the problem, but people are reporting that Instagram is now down. We seem to be having some real issues in the country in terms of the social media platforms. Right. Somebody just brought up an interesting point in the comments. She said that, and this is from Marlon Thomas. They said the minibus and the taxis are not observing COVID-19 rules. Sorry, and this is so true. You know, we see the task force bus going around and picking up persons. Yes, we see that for breaking COVID-19 regulations. Well, the buses are doing the same thing. And it's a pandemic we're dealing with. So you can't plug one hole and left a big gaping one over there. You know, these are serious things that need to be addressed. Folks, as we're talking about serious things that need to be addressed, you would be aware that recently we saw, where we are still seeing, sorry, a spike, an unexplained rise in the amount of persons being reported missing, going missing. We had the young man Joel Skit, who was subsequently found dead. And again, our condolences to his family and his friends, relatives. And then we saw another missing young man, I think was from region number 1. And he too has this afternoon been reported dead. Right? Sad situation playing out in our country, I must say. Extremely sad situation playing out in our country. Right? Decomposed body of missing Pope Knock found Arakaka River, region number 1. This is according to News Source Guyana, who is reporting on this. These are also bad numbers. The number of persons who have been reported missing in the last month or so is extremely alarming. Again, we see another young man who has now been reported found dead. And this, if this does not alarm you and concern you, then something is wrong with you. Our thoughts and our prayers and our condolences go out to the family and the friends of this young man also. This is extremely alarming and concerning. As a Guyanese, I'm wondering what is happening. And this is the third day I'm reporting on this matter. I'm bringing this thing up. What is happening in our country? And the reality is that I've been scouring the newspapers, our local news agencies, to see whether or not there is a statement coming out from the Guyana Police Force or the minister responsible for security in this country. I have not seen yet. I may be corrected if there is a statement by the Minister of Home Affairs, Robeson Ben. Maybe someone can share it with me. Right? Maybe someone can share it with me. It has been over a week now that these issues are being brought up in social media circles and in traditional media circles, and we have not heard. There's a deafening silence from those responsible for our security. Again, right? Again, why is this so? We see another young man turn up dead today. As we talk about that, we still have these people who are missing. There are a number of people who are still missing. Folks, there's a young lady from Linden, all across the country. There are persons missing. What is really happening in our country? As we speak, these people are still missing. They, Kevin James, Essequibo, right? So you know, it's such a sad situation, and I want to let people know that they have to ensure that they take care of their security and their safety and their friends and their family. We can't say anything else because it seems as though uh, you know, and you would think that after a week of this, you would think that after a week of this matter fermenting in public spheres, you would think that a week after this matter being brought up in social media and all around the island, people's right. So we're getting information here from someone. They said that they found Kevin alive, which is very good, and we're thankful for that person. If that is true, that is extremely good news. The young man from Essequibo was found alive, according to one of the persons in the comment. If that is true, again, we don't know, we cannot confirm. If that is true, that is good news. But we see this trend continuing, right? We see this trend continuing. But folks, you know, amidst all of this, I'm hoping to, well, we're having technical issues. We're hoping to get the regional chair, region number 7, Mr. Kenneth Williams, on the line for him to talk about what played out in region number 7 over the last few days. For those persons who are not aware, there was serious flooding in region number 7. Cayuga Mazarine Civil Defense Commission received reports of flooding as a result of heavy rainfall. Reports on the regional chairman and the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission confirmed that half of the village, with a population of 2,500, have been affected. Right, it's a primary mining community. Right, Aranca, region number 7. The CDC conduct is in contact with the regional administration and will deploy a team shortly to respond to this particular issue. This is what is happening in region number 7, right? Flooding in region number 7, as we continue to see some of the pictures coming out of region number 7 there with that flooding situation. And of course, we hope that the CDC is going to be moving swiftly to remedy this situation because, of course, we want to ensure that those persons receive adequate help and in a timely manner also. Right? Hopefully, on tomorrow's show, we get our connection sorted out. Um, you know, so that we can get some word from the regional chair, Mr. Kenneth Williams, because I spoke to him earlier today and he said that he is going to be going with the CDC to check out the affected areas, and they're going to be, of course, trying to bring relief to those persons in region number 7, in that particular village affected, their mining community affected in region number 7. Right. Folks, right now we want to shift our attention. Before we shift our attention to that. Let's also continue to tell you about what is happening in the news. Right? Let's continue to tell you about what is happening in the news right now. Of course, you know that yesterday we heard the. Let me do some more. Right. Yesterday we heard the arguments in the petition case, petition 88. Right? We heard arguments in petition 88. Right. And for those persons who weren't, who did not follow what happened yesterday, let me just fill you in on what happened in that case. The ruling is set for April the 26th. This month, you will get a ruling on that petition hearing, folks. And I purposely brought this story up because I want to segue into our story behind the story. But let's talk to you about what happened yesterday, and let's get some more details. Of course, the APNU AFC was represented by senior lawyer John Jeremy, Trinidadian senior counsel who represented the petitioners in this case, right? And he maintained that Section 22, the Election Laws Amendment Act, which was heavily relied on by the Guyana Elections Commission to bring Order 60, the recount order, into effect, was unconstitutional. He therefore invited the court to nullify the results of the 2020 regional and general elections and declared by GECOM on August 2nd, 2020. Now, for those persons following and those persons who who have the mental aptitude to follow what has been going on, right? This petition deals with the legality of the recount order number 60 of 2020, which was used by GECOM, which was supposed to use, let me say this first, which was supposed to be used by GECOM to come to a final credible vote count. Right? This is the instrument GECOM put in place to remedy all of the confusion behind the elections. They were going to use this recount order to put to bed any questions that these elections had behind it. The recount order was going to facilitate the opening of the boxes, was supposed to facilitate opening of the boxes, and you're going to cross-match the documents in the box with the ballots. Simply put, that was what the recount order was supposed to facilitate. It created a legal framework so that GECOM could remedy this problem. Right? And I want those persons, those PPP supporters who are on the live, to pay close attention to what I'm saying now. The recount order states very clearly how GECOM was going to go about remedying this problem that we had, in that people were contesting or challenging the results that were declared before based on the SOPs. Right? The PPP challenged the results that were declared based on the statements of poll. So we moved on from that and we said, you know what? We need a legal framework. GECOM said, okay, we need a legal framework to go into these boxes. We are going to craft this legislation that will allow us to open the box and do an audit of the boxes. right? We will go into these boxes, we will take out the documents that we can use to verify the ballots, and we will go through those documents, ensure that ballots match the documents, and everything is everything. Accounting, that's what they were going to do. They're going to do accounting, auditing. And everybody knows in accounting or auditing, if you don't have your receipts to show how this product was bought or when it was bought, then you can't account for it. For all intents and purposes, it don't belong to you because you have no receipts. So again, that was what the recount order was intended to do. How did they get to this position of crafting this order 60? They were standing on the legal framework of section 22 of the Amendment Act that said that they had the right, basically, and this is what they were claiming, their interpretation, to remedy this problem by creating this recount order. What the petitioners are arguing, Mr. John Jeremy and the APNU AFC petitioners, and that look, Section 22 of the Election Laws Amendment Act doesn't allow GCOM to create this new law. Right? It doesn't allow GCOM to create this new law. GCOM, of course, resorted to the national recount after this dispute over the election results declared by region number 4 in region number 4. Right? So they are saying, look, you can't use section 22 to create a new law. Hence, the recount order is unconstitutional. Right? So, hence, we can't take anything that came from the recount. We didn't even get into the fact, we didn't even get into the evidence of it, of fraud that was unearthed during the recount. That's not what this petition is dealing with. That's a whole other, that's a petition that they're trying to throw out because, of course, they know they can't get to that. But, folks, that is essentially what is happening here. And I use this particular issue as a segue to my story behind the story. GCOM is being represented by a man called Anthony, or people say Tony Astafan. And that is our story behind the story today. Who is this man? Who is Mr. Astafan? For persons who were following the news, you would know that this is a Dominican senior counsel who is the lawyer for GCOM. This is the man that GCOM was foisting on Mr. Lowenfield, saying that you have to be represented by this man, Mr. Lowenfield, and this is his legal team. Said, look, you can't tell me which lawyer I must choose. This is GCOM's lawyer. He will represent GCOM's position. Right. So, who is this man? So we did a little digging. Our researchers on the show did a little digging to find out who is this senior counsel. Who is this Mr. Astafan? And you might be surprised what we found with just a little Google search. Quite interesting, and it speaks volumes about this fraudulent administration and the fact that this is the man that they would lean on to represent GCOM. A man with such interesting past, right? Let us dig in a little bit to see who Mr. Astafan is. So with just a bit of digging, we saw this report. Lawyer accused of leaking IPO information. What was this about and what year was this? Right? This was 2013. Senior counsel Anthony Astafan, lead counsel representing Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit, has been named as the source of the breach of confidential information regarding the declaration filed by Mr. Skerrit in the Integrity Commission. So this could raise a little eyebrow. This is the lawyer that GCOM decided to take. Well, just a little dig. And this is public information, We didn't do any undercover work. This is things that if you Google, you will see who this man is. Right? Then what else? What else did we find after we did a little digging to see who Mr. Astafan is? Let's see what else we found. Let me go here. Right? So with just a little more digging, we found out that this is a very interesting chap. Right? Says here, let me bring this up for you. Washington investigating Dominica's diplomatic passport issue. Right? The U.S. law enforcement agency has ordered the turnover of all information in possession of Dominican Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit and attorney Anthony Tony Astafan, who acts as Skerrit's advisor in the country's diplomatic passport scheme. Right. Let me go down some more. Dominica has been the subject of international media attention. Let me go to the interesting part. Let me go here where it implicates, and of course this is not me saying this, Dominican President Roosevelt Skerrit and his cohort Anthony Astafan, aka Tony, are already accused of numerous forms of crimes including money laundering, trafficking of drugs, murder, abduction, and the selling of the country's citizenship to various individuals in the world. This is the man. Right? This is the man that GCOM has chosen to represent them. This is the man that GCOM has chosen to represent them. And you might think that is it. You might think that is all. That is not all. Only last year, Mr. Astafan was exposed for his role, his duplicity in the Dominica election reform debacle. And I want us to pay keen attention to this, because it mirrors what is happening in Guyana right now. And I think this is probably the reason. This is probably the reason why he's embroiled in this whole election talale in Guyana. Because he has experience in trying to befuddle people when it comes to elections, law, and reform. Right? So, we found another headline. Right? Let me share that one with you. We found another headline. and we talk about who these people are, and it's good for us to understand who these people are. Let me find it here for you. Good. Let's look at this. Let me bring it up so you can see. Dominican-born justice in Ontario, right? Dr. Ivan Andre exposes the misleading intentions of Dominican Labour Party attorney Anthony Estefan on elections campaign finance reform. And we are going to listen to some audio. We're going to listen to some audio as he spoke about voters lists in Dominica. It's almost a blueprint. It's almost word for word what the PPP was pushing here through Jack Dio and all them leading up to the elections, when the APNU AFC was pushing for a new voters list, cleansing of the voters list. Apparently, between 2008 and 2010, Mr. Estefan was plying his trade in Dominica along the same lines of electoral reform, trying to tell people the same things that Jack Dio was pushing. So you wonder where these people got these ideas from, and how, and it's no coincidence that we find the same people who doing the skullduggery in their country representing GCOM. So let's go to that. And we are going to go in depth into what was said by Mr. Estefan about Dominican electoral reform and the same issue of voters list. The same issue surrounding the voters list. Right? Let's listen in. All right. Let me just pull it back.
We have to understand 10:27 a.m. with an email from Tony Estefan. And here's what he had to say. These guys are talking about reforms to include ID cards and, in bold letters, complete re-registration. Such reform will undermine your re-election legacy, as the opposition will say. Look, the commission agreed with us. Reform was required because of widespread fraud. That is what this so-called senior counsel had to say in 2008.
Right. So let's unpack what he just said there. Dr. Ivan Andre is exposing Mr. Estefan here from an email he sent apparently to the Prime Minister of Dominica. At that point in time, the opposition in Dominica wanted electoral reform, which included a whole new list. And Estefan here is advising the Prime Minister that, look, don't worry with no reform. Because the people, the opposition has said, look, the commission agreed with us. We had fraud, so we need reform. Let's continue. Let's bring it back.
As the opposition will say, look, the commission agreed with us. Reform was required because of widespread fraud. That is what this so-called senior counsel had to say in 2008. An officer of the court, what did he have to say in 2010? 2010, after the opposition filed, and the oppositions can speak for themselves, court action challenging the legitimacy of certain elections, went on record and said the following: as long as voters' names were on voters' lists, they were qualified. Let me repeat that, please. As long as voters' names were on their lists, they were qualified to vote. And I'll show in a minute how that is such an absurd and dishonest interpretation of Dominican electoral laws. What happened in October of 2019? Tony Estefan threatens legal action over alleged removal of names from the voters list. Legal action to remove names from the voters list. Now hear this. Section 7C of the Registration of Electors Act says, quote, a person registered pursuant to this part shall remain registered unless and until his name is deleted from the register because A, he is dead. So as far as this senior council is concerned, the chief elections officer has no discretion to remove dead people from the list. That is the electoral reform they're interested in. B, an objection to his registration has been allowed. And C, he has been absent from Dominica for a period exceeding 5 years. Example, a relative of yours is living in Texas for 30 years. That person visits Dominica within a year of the general election. As far as this gentleman's interpretation of the electoral laws are concerned, as long as that person is on the voters list, he or she can vote. This is a recipe for fraud. A recipe for fraud.
A recipe for fraud. Now, if you were listening to that and you thought this man was talking about Guyana, you wouldn't be blamed. We can't blame you if you thought he was talking about Guyana, because this mirrors almost exactly the playbook of the PPP leading up to elections. So it is no surprise that the man that was pushing this madness in Dominica is now representing GCOM. You hear what the man was saying there? According to Astefan, he called him the so-called senior counsel. Right? The so-called senior counsel. Look, this is what he called him at. That's what I may call him that. The so-called senior counsel. According to him, the chief elections officer got no right to take people off the list even if they're dead. Does this sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like the voice of the PPP? And you wonder where they got these things from and why is it that Astefan is now representing GCOM? Let us connect the dots. He also said that, look, according to the laws, if the person hasn't been living in the country for more than a certain time, the name had to be called from the list. Does that sound familiar? He said that the fact that persons could be living in another country for 30 years, the name don't come off the list, and they come in the country just before the elections and could vote, is a recipe for fraud. Does that sound familiar? It sounds very familiar because we were facing those same issues right here in Guyana. Those same issues. So it is not surprising, folks. It is not surprising that GCOM, as this man, right, Mr. Potato Head's evil cousin, representing them. A man who has been fingered in so many cases under investigation, has been pushing dishonest interpretation of election laws in Dominica. This is the man that GCOM has representing them. It is no surprise. And it's quite telling that what the justice said just now, that look, what Astefan is suggesting is a recipe for fraud. We were saying the same thing about Guyana's voters list. We said that a voters list that is not cleansed is a recipe for fraud, and we saw that on March 2nd. We saw what happened. You know? Right? Yes. Mr. Potato Head's evil cousin, Anthony Astefan, is the representative for GCOM, who, in his own country, not me saying this, let me read the report for you again because we wanted to sink in Who the GCOM got representing them? This is from the Blitz. This published on June the 4th, 2019. Washington investigating Dominica's passport issues. In the report, it states, Dominica's President Roosevelt Skerrit and his cohort attorney Anthony Astafan, aka Tony, are already accused of numerous forms of crimes, including money laundering, trafficking of drugs, murder, abduction, as well as selling the country's citizenship to various individuals around the world. They are even accused of selling diplomatic passports. But the most alarming information is that the duo has collected millions of dollars by selling citizenship of Dominica to a number of persons, including members of infamous D Company. I don't know. Right? It has even been alleged that Anthony Astafan has played a key role in helping a few of the D Company members to get diplomatic passports to the country. And that is what we have here, folks. Right? This is the manner of man, the GCOM. And again, remember, GCOM is trying to tell Lowenfield that this is the man that must support you, this man. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a professional investigator to find out something about this man. You just take the Google search. And this is a story behind the story, folks. We have the petition happening, yes. Right? And we spoke about his position in Dominica in terms of how he's trying to distort, or how he was trying to distort the interpretation according to the justice. He was trying to distort the interpretation of Antigua electoral laws. But here he is in Guyana, representing GCOM. And it says here, GCOM attorney, senior counsel, Astafan told the High Court that GCOM acted in accordance with Section 22 of election laws, which set the foundation for the Elections Commission to address difficulties arising during the elections. Further, Astafan submitted that the Caribbean Court of Justice in 2020 ruling had ratified directly and indirectly the purpose, motive, and lawfulness of Order 60 for the purpose of removing difficulties which were slowly but surely dividing Guyanans in a series of severe social and political upheavals. So, there we have it. The story behind the story, folks, is Mr. Astafan. Shady, that's your call. That is your call. You connect the dots. You decide whether or not this would have been someone that you would have chosen to represent you. That is your call. Very unlikely that I would have. But folks, that's the country we're living in. That's the country we're living in, and the sad reality is that we have to continue dealing with these people until they're out of government. Until they're out of government. I want to say thank you very much for our loyal viewers who are on and enjoying the program. As we prepare to end the program this afternoon, let me just say, again, a wonderful, wonderful thank you. Continue to support what we're doing here in APNU AFC TV. Sherrod Duncan is on at 8. And of course, we like to carry Mark Benchcock straight up also. So we normally share his program on our page. So you can catch that here also. That's at 9 p.m. Unfortunately, today we wouldn't have Across the Waves with Miss Annette, MP Annette Ferguson, but Sher Duncan will be here at 8, and then of course we'll join Mark at 9 for Straight Up. Folks, we want to say thank you very much. It has been lovely spending a few minutes with you. Although we started late, we had a very interesting program as we unpacked the credible and valid information. Do enjoy the rest of the evening. As I always say to you, and given the fact that we are in this serious pandemic one, and plus our country is being is faced with an unexplained spike in missing persons and persons who are being found dead. So we want to encourage you to stay safe, both from the COVID and from any ills of our societies, sorry. So let's continue to work together for national development. Until we meet again tomorrow, 5:30. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Thank you for joining us. Do enjoy the rest of your evening.